So next session is session 10, and we have 4 presenters here, and this session will be chaired by Dr. Shoaib Ekram. So I will request Shoaib Ekram to come on that. And Tanya please speak on this magazine. Yes. So I will take privilege to give a brief introduction of Dr. Shoaib Ekram. Dr. Shoaib Ekram is an assistant professor in the Department of English, Rabindra Bharati University, Calcutta. He has obtained his Ph.D. in English from the English and the Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. He has published many book chapters and articles in journals. His area of interest include literary theory, Shakespeare studies, linguistics, Indian writing in English, Urdu studies, and literary historiography, and language politics, and so on. So now I hand over to you the session. Thank you.
Okay, we have 4 presenters in this session. I'll be just calling your name one by one, and please come up. Dr. Tasnima Yasmin, Sheikh Abid Hasan, Arif Ansari, and Masuma Khatun. So we go by order. We have first Dr. Tasnima Yasmin, and the topic of her presentation is Antithetical Dimensions or Analogous Manifestations, Islamic Spirituality and Indian Nationalism for India and Islam by Rezaul Karim.
So, good morning everyone. In today's talk, I will assess the issue of identity politics based on ethnicity and religious affiliation in the text For India and Islam, published in 1937 by Rezaul Karim. Now, this is a piece of non-fictional prose set against the backdrop of the Indian freedom struggle. I will look into the role of Karim's conceptualization of nation formation in the given text at a time that was riddled with debates of Muslimness versus Indianness. The studying literary texts remain crucial as they create an alternative space within the boundaries of textual expression that captures human experience. More recently, the rise of English as the global lingua franca has increased academic learning of the language and texts in it. It has popularized different genres of literature in the English language written by non-native English speakers as well. Now, one of the aspects of literature in the English language is pre-partition Indian writing in English. It is a body of written work which includes both fiction as well as non-fiction. So our focus will be on non-fictional works which include essays, opinion pieces, articles, pamphlets, manifestos, and newspaper columns. Now, these highlight the first-hand experience of individuals who witnessed and observed the varied socio-political tensions leading to an imbalanced social dynamic during the Indian freedom struggle. A subset of this literature includes the writings of political activists, mainstream politicians, social reformers, and academics. Such politically charged works reflect the enthusiasm of creating a new definition of the motherland that is free from colonial dominance. Reading this literature transports readers to a time that portrays the struggles and difficulties of people who were fighting to retain their existent identity while juggling with multiple influences that were prevalent regarding the creation of a new India. The crisscrossing of planned movements by the colonized often clashed with sporadic reactionary incidents. Now, these are reflected in the dichotomous sentiments that were being ingrained in the people's minds regarding the us versus them binary on the basis of religion. For example, taking the case of pre-partition Bengal delineates the numerous communal riots in Calcutta, Dhaka, Kishorganj, Pabna, Noakhali, etc., which went beyond mere stereotyping. In this instance, we see that physical violence led to the sufferings of Hindus and Muslims alike. These episodes show the politically channelized shift in ideology based on the need for religious majoritarianism. With the growth of oppositional sentiments, the objective of the British Raj was to institutionalize these differences among Indians rather than emphasizing on commonalities. Consequently, the prevalent religious differences were accentuated by the British divide and rule policy that focused on creating the idea of separate electorates for Hindus and Muslims under the Indian Councils Act 1909. This policy further helped to foster a sense of separateness between communities, and it sowed successfully the seeds of mistrust. A turning point in the politics of this time was the division of Bengal in 1905. Sectarianism and separatism became key ideas that ignited growing tensions between religious factions. The roots go back to the days when the British government were cast in the position of a third party between the Indian National Congress and a rising new political force called the Muslim League. And this created ripples in the political scenario of pre-independent India, and there were a myriad of Muslim voices who actually opposed the Muslim League on the basis of its growing irrelevance. But incidents like the Round Table Conference of the 1930s prepared the ground for Jinnah's return. This return did not assure holistic progress of Indian society, and there was the creation of several factions later. Additionally, the conciliatory policy of the colonial government with the Muslim League furthered the ideological segregation of Jinnah to create a separate homeland for Muslims. So this also indicates that the founding of the All India Muslim League in 1906 articulated the concerns of only the Muslims in the wake of Hindu reform movements, despite the fact that Jinnah began as a moderate voice of the Indian National Congress. So further, the rise of the forerunners of Hindu reform groups in 1905 that culminated into the foundation of the Akhil Bharatiya Hindu Mahasabha in 1915 and its dissociation from the INC, Indian National Congress, made it a new player in the political arena that dealt with the issues, needs and concerns of the Hindus alone. So this triadic division of power created a deeply polarized landscape on the Indian subcontinent. And against this background, there were individuals, mostly men, who tried to reconstruct a very rational discourse by avoiding the chaos and bitterness of identity politics. So they always had to frequently face the brunt of judgmental and insecure extremists from various sides. So if we see the scholarly studies, then they confirm that there were many Indian Muslim nationalists like Maulana Abul Kalam Azad or Maulana Hussain Ahmed Madani, and they seem to represent Muslim voices who were concerned with the nation building process. However, if we take the case of the Bengal province, then we see that there is very little or no acknowledgement of the Bengali Muslim voices like those of Rezaul, Karim, Abdul Samad, Qazi Nazrul Islam on a pan-India scale, or even say Muzaffar Ahmed, despite the fact that the Bengal province presents a very vivid and vital chapter in terms of giving the country some crucial voices of awakening, activism and amity. So we'll take the case of Rezaul Karim, and even before we see his vision of religion, that is Islam, and nation, which is India, in light of his regional identity of being a Bengali, we will just take a look at what the word identity actually means and what does it imply. So identity is multifaceted in nature. It creates a difference between an individual's sense of who they are versus the perceived notions about what they represent in the eyes of others. And this calls for an intersectional study of identity. So intersectionality was actually a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in a paper in the 1980s. And it refers to how different aspects of a person's identity intersect to create unique experiences of privilege and oppression. So this adds to the complexity of the essence of identity that is fluid. It becomes a multidimensional perspective shaped by intersecting factors such as class, caste, race, gender, region, religion, etc. So the importance of an intersectional perspective lies in its ability to reveal how the systems of power, such as say racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, etc., interact and compound each other. So if we take the case of the Indian Muslim identity in pre-independent India, then it was a complex and evolving subject shaped by religious, social, political and colonial factors. Apart from the divisive policies of the British, the downfall of the Mughal Empire and its declining power led to feelings of disempowerment and a quest to redefine the Indian Muslim identity. Additionally, the Hindu revivalist movements of this time created an ideological divide, and it juxtaposed Hinduness with Indianness, leading to the generalization of mainstream Indian identity. And there were attempts to counter-handle these by Muslim educational reformists like, say, Sir Syed Ahmed Khan and the Aligarh movement that blended Western education while upholding Islamic traditions. Yet, the dynamic situation paved way for social divisions between religious communities that increased tensions and raised questions of oppressive measures. So, we'll take a look at Dr. Rezaul Karim and a brief biography about him. For the uninitiated, Rezaul Karim's honorary D.Litt and the National Award as a brave Indian freedom fighter are a few of the many tags that he bore during his lifetime. He began his career as an academic at the Bahawalpur Girls College, Murshidabad. He was known for his advocacy of education as a tool for social change, especially in the context of the Bengali Muslim community. In the political arena, Rezaul Karim was aligned with progressive and nationalist movements, contributing to the growth of social and political awareness among the people of Bengal. So we have the book For India and Islam by Rezaul Karim, and he raises some issues that Bengali Muslims in particular and Indian Muslims in general may have to face, and he explains the identity crisis faced by them in the wake of the Indian freedom struggle. So firstly, he protests against class-based politics and warns against the pseudo-elitism of classist, casteist and religious affiliations. In the very first chapter of the book, he notes, one of the fundamental creeds of a consistent nationalist is that he is Indian first, Indian second, and always an Indian. This at once negates the hostile attitudes that those bound by the shackles of regionalism may foster. It inculcates the ideal that was prevalent among freedom fighters and nationalists of India at that time, who saw themselves as one in the face of British domination, ethnic separatism, and religious sectarianism. Reza juxtaposes this notion with the element of love for one's land of origin and residence as a crucial part of Muslim faith. He gives the example of Turkey as a very good example that has succeeded to combat the dangers of volatile ideals like pan-Islamism or extraterritorial patriotism. His logic rests in the view that each country needs to first address, recognize, and solve its internal issues and then talk about world federation. Further, Reza was deeply critical of those who fueled fanatical views among Muslims and fostered the Muslim first attitude. This is marked by his long and passionate entries in the book about the overwhelming joy of seeing the national flag of India being raised and singing the national song with the hope that India will one day be free not only from the British domination, but freedom will reign in the minds and hearts of its people. Secondly, his book critiques the social disparity in the country and the resultant marginalization of many ethnicities and religious communities in India, particularly in the context of the British colonial rule. To counter this, Reza sees the Indian National Congress as a beacon of hope. The basis of his argument, apart from his own political affiliations, rests in the Indian National Congress's ideals of inclusivity, the notion of community service, the vision of a unified India that is free from foreign influence and visible or tangible work at the grassroots level. His acceptance of the Congress instead of the Muslim League also rests in his deep-seated belief in the core ideals of Islam, namely sincerity, community service, and tolerance of differences. He clarifies that his objective is not to eulogize Islam in the spirit of any propaganda or mission. Rather, his effort is to do away with the misconceptions that make some people believe that all Indian Muslims are comfortable with the idea of a multicultural India, and they do not wish to form a separate country of their own. Thirdly, he points out that Muslims, despite their historical contributions to the Indian civilization, were increasingly becoming economically disadvantaged and socially isolated. He realizes that the root cause of this issue is the lack of political agency among Muslims, and this created underrepresentation in the British political structures. He emphasizes on the need for Muslims to be actively involved in the nationalist movement and to reassert their political rights for the betterment of the community and the betterment of the nation at large. So the only ray of hope that he saw was in the path-breaking work of Gandhiji, who worked for the upliftment of the entire nation, regardless of caste or religion. Reza questions in this text, whose is the cause of the depressed classes? Gandhiji is a Hindu saint, and if the depressed classes mostly belong to the Hindus, is it then a cause of the Hindus? Have other communities nothing to do with it? And in the very next line, Reza answers, if Islam means peace, and if the aim of the chosen religion of God is to establish peace between God and man, then there cannot be a single Muslim who can afford to neglect for the uplift of the depressed classes. So he asks the Muslims who were siding with the League to rethink their civic and social responsibility and to set the correct example of leadership, which brings forth the question of what is the Muslim interest. And Reza finds the answer in the concern that Muslims were struggling to maintain their religious and cultural identity amidst the growing influence of westernization and other polarized versions of nationalism. A lot of this tussle was fueled by politicians who claimed to be messiahs of the community, and he argues, how can the Muslim leaders think of safeguarding the interests of their own community when the vital things are wholly and inseparably linked with the entire body politic of the country? So Reza stresses on the importance of preserving Islamic values while engaging in the broader Indian national movement. Lastly, Reza also critiques the divisive politics that sought to pit the Muslims against other communities, particularly the Hindus. And he urges Muslims to avoid the politics of division and instead to align themselves with the broader cause of the Indian independence, seeing themselves as a part of the larger national struggle. He notes, the Muslims are not a separate body of people and not a nomadic tribe having no fixed habitation, are not a passive, spectacular resident of a dependent country, but are an integral part of India and are inseparably connected with all that stands for India's greatness and glory. They will rise with India and fall with India. Hence, India's interests are the best interests of the Muslims, for which they will die, by which he will stand against all temptations, odds, and difficulties. So we see that Reza argued that Islam, with its rich history of intellectual and cultural contributions, has an integral role to play in India's future, and he advocated for a vision of India where Muslims are active participants in the nation-building process, balancing their religious identity with their commitment to India's independence. So his legacy is one of dedication to the improvement of society through education and activism, and his book, For India and Islam, is a reflective and passionate exploration of the complex relationship between Indian nationalism and Islam during the colonial period, which echoes much of the discourses that remain ever so relevant in the present times. Thank you, and sorry for exceeding the time.
Assalamu alaikum, and like whatever I would say is against whatever my previous speaker has said, and I attempt to deconstruct ethnic democracy and equate it with the model that we have been experiencing in our lived experience in India. So basically, if you look at ethnic democracy has been used by some political scientists to describe a governance system that combines a structured ethnic dominance with democratic political and civil rights for all. Both the dominant ethnic group, typically an ethnic majority, and the minority ethnic groups have citizenship and are able to fully participate in the political process. However, critics of ethnic democracy model argue that it is a contradiction in terms and thus conceptually inadequate or confusing. These critics allege that the purported ethnic democracies, most notably Israel, are not democratic at all, or at best a sort of semi-democracy. Now, when we discuss semi-democracy, we have to talk about West Bengal as a model, where certain communities have the democratic capacity to participate and register their protest, while other communities, specifically within the party society line, cannot participate and end up fighting between each other and are victims of ethnic democracy as well as party society created by ethno-nationalists. Now, how do we see West Bengal as as an ethno-nationalist democracy? So ethnic democracy manifests in various ways, but to intellectualize West Bengal creation as Hindu Israel by applying Samuel's Smuha has never been done. If we look at the history of West Bengal was partitioned in 1947, but the intellectualization of partition of West Bengal has been happening since the 1920s, and it is accelerated when communal award is given and Fazlul Haq becomes the Prime Minister of Bengal, and then in 1938 he is unable to create a government with the Congress when Subhash Chandra Bose wanted to create a Hindu-Muslim unity government, but is stopped by Gandhi, Maulana Azad, Patel, as well as other Congress leaders who don't want any government with Fazlul Haq. And then Fazlul Haq is forced to bring out an ally in the form of Shah Prasad Mukherjee, who also ultimately ditches him, and he is forced to go to the Muslim League side. From there till 1946, Direct Action Day starts a different kind of politics where the burden has been shifted to the Muslims. But actually, if you look at the history, then it's the Gandhi and the Nehru and the Ambedkar and others who are playing the role of Nazis of varying degree. If you look at Balfour Declaration, the people who objected to Balfour Declaration and creation of Israel were basically the Jews. The Nazis and the Arabs, they didn't have any objection to creation of Israel. So we have to understand how the Bengali Muslim is getting separated in the idea of creating an India where Bengal government is sacrificed at the altar of all India outlook, and 54 MLCs from Hindus, including scheduled caste and scheduled tribe of that time, and 4 plus 4 Anglo-Indians, they vote in favor of partition of Bengal. Whereas in Sylhet referendum we see Gopinath Bhattacharya of the Congress, who is the Assamese Prime Minister of that time, he engages with the Muslim League and communalizes the Sylhet referendum, and after 6th July or 7th July 1947, Sylhet is ultimately sent to Pakistan. But the reason for sending Sylhet to Pakistan also is a tricky question, because the inclusion of Sylhet inside Assam increases the power of Bengalis, which the Assamese Hindu nationalists at that point didn't want to have. Then we see Vallabhbhai Patel partitioning Sylhet because of administrative reasons. After West Bengal creation and before West Bengal creation, we see genocide of Bengali Muslims. If we read Hungry Bengal by Dr. Janam Mukherjee, then he categorizes that the Direct Action Day results in flight of Bengali Muslim intellectual from Kolkata and West Bengal. It is not the Urdu-speaking Muslims who went to East Pakistan or East Bengal. It is the Bengali Muslims who are forced. Then even after partition of Bengal, we see small-scale riots against Rajbangshi Muslims in North India or North-West Bengal. Then we see riots against Bengali Muslims in Kolkata, specifically the 1964 riots, which is specifically done by the Hindus who have arrived from East Pakistan. So the Bengali Muslim is becoming a Palestinian in this point, where he has to leave his homeland, and even if he doesn't want to go to Bangladesh or erstwhile East Pakistan, he has to go there. Then we see new movements by the leftists, and the left government is created again. In 1988, we see Katra Masjid massacre, where 3,000 Bengali Muslims are eliminated by allegedly RSP cadre, not even your Hindu nationalist. So the bias of Hinduness is there in all the governments that we see that come into West Bengal. Cut to 2021, post 2021, we see bulldozer being practiced against workers of a party called Indian Secular Front. We see post-poll rape that happens against largely the Bengali Muslims and other Bengalis who oppose the Trinamool Congress. Then we go to Bihar in Bhagalpur, where Ram Janmabhoomi results in genocide of Bengali Muslims there, and the mass graves are kind of invisibilized by turning them into cauliflower fields. In the meantime, we have Assam. In Assam, the parasocial identity of the Bengali Muslims, especially the Mias, they change after partition of India, and they start conversing in Assamese, and they provide the backbone of Assamese nationalism or Na-Assamia nationalism in Assam. But in 1983, we see Nelly massacre, when more than 3,000 Mias are eliminated, and the justice for the Mias is not ensured. Assam Accord gets enshrined in the Indian Constitution, and the citizenship laws of India is converted into a caste system. So all in all, what I am trying to represent is that the Bengali Muslim, who is a Mul Nivasi of India, he or she or they are always at the periphery of rights. They are from India, but not inside the Indian ecosystem. Another bone of contention is OBC reservation. How Bengali Muslims are denied OBC reservation in various universities of West Bengal and by the Public Service Commission, and how discrimination is carried against them. But at the same time, these people, when they are outside West Bengal, they get their due in other Indian states. So West Bengal has to be seen as a Hindu Israel, where even the land reform movement does not help the disenfranchised Bengali Muslim farmer or the laborer. Land reform movement in South Bengal specifically rehabilitates those Hindus who have arrived from East Bengal or East Pakistan.
Just a minute, can I ask one question? We take questions later, please. That's all right.
Yeah. So my concluding line is that progressive social justice of Bengalis that Bengalis wanted to ensure, it has already been made in the politics of ethnic democracy. And without deconstructing ethnic democracy or the creation of West Bengal through Hindu lens, it is difficult to make sure that the Indian Bengali Muslims get their voice. For example, if you look at the CA 2019 bill, it is not the Hindu Bengalis of Assam who are advocating for CA 2019. It is the Bangladeshi Hindus who are lobbying for CA 2019 to get passed in Indian Parliament, so that they can come into West Bengal and fulfill the Hindu nationalist demands of making West Bengal a Hindu homeland state. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, as Sir said, the title of my paper is about sacrifice as resistance, and the text that I will read in the discussion is actually Girish Karnad's The Dreams of Tipu Sultan, and how actually Karnad represented Tipu. And throughout this discussion, we might go into the issue of the broad Muslim representation of in India actually. And before going on to Karnad's Tipu, I want to give a brief discussion on the colonial representation of Tipu and the recent Indian representation of Tipu. So I'm naming three texts: The Surgeon's Daughter by Sir Walter Scott, and Tipu Sultan, A Tale of the Mysore Wars by Captain Meadows Taylor, and the third text is The Tiger of Mysore by G.A. Henty. So if we read the text, we will realize that Tipu has been stereotyped in those particular texts. There is a colonial, I would say, representation of Tipu, and I want to name one thesis which clearly deals with the colonial representation of Tipu and why actually some British writers did that. It was clearly discussed in that thesis, and the thesis is titled Tyrant, Tipu Sultan, and the Reconstruction of British Imperial Identity. In that particular thesis, the author Michael Soresi argues that Tipu has been represented in a stereotypical way to justify the colonial rule, and by meaning that we are better, we will give you proper good institution to survive and all that. And so Tipu was deemed as a murderer, as a colonizer, as someone who converted many people into Islam, and as someone who destroyed temple and all that. And if we go to some recent representation on Tipu, I'm naming two texts here. Tipu Sultan by Bikram Shampat and Tipu Sultan, Villain or Hero, an anthology. It was by Sitaram Goel, and in the text we see the same thing going on. I would say continuation of the colonial representation of Tipu. And Tipu here also is famed or deemed as or portrayed as a murderer, as a villain, or as someone who destroyed temple, killed many Hindus and things like that. So, and in social media platforms like Facebook, WhatsApp, and YouTube and all that, we see the same thing going on. Along with Tipu, some other legendary Muslim figures are portrayed or deemed as colonizers, murderers, as someone who killed many people. So I believe an attempt is being made to rewrite history with misinformation, or if I can say partial information. And this is very concerning, and I think the same thing has been discussed yesterday about the stereotypical, a common trope in a particular representation of some Muslim figures. So I again believe that an alternative history is being in the process of being written and propagated. If we go to Karnad's Tipu, we will see that Karnad saw Tipu as someone who fought against British imperialism, and Karnad saw Tipu as the first nationalist, a kind of a proto-nationalist who fought for the Indian nationalist movement. He was portrayed as a proto-nationalist, and the struggle he had to go through. If you read the text, the hymns of Tipu Sultan, you will realize that Karnad mainly addressed four types of struggle or issues that Karnad had to go through in defending the British imperialism, and I'm not going into the detail. I'm simply naming them one by one. One is warning others against the vicious British designs, and here we can say he warned the Nizam of Hyderabad, the Marathas and all that. He said that if we do not fight the expansionism of the British, then we might all be erased one day. Befriending France, he tried to befriend Napoleon in challenging the British, competing the British or the English in Wales, and eventually the Anglo-Mysore War. There were four Anglo-Mysore War, and in the fourth Anglo-Mysore War in 1799, Tipu was ultimately defeated. And again here I want to argue that in those struggle of Tipu, there was an element of sacrifice. Tipu had to bear many losses, relinquishment in doing or challenging the British expansionism or British imperialism. And here again I'm not going into the detail, but I'm simply naming the kind of sacrifices or things that Tipu had to give up for challenging the British. Obviously, there was the loss of land that Tipu had to bear. Apart from that, when Tipu wanted to befriend Napoleon, he had to, the enmity of the British was, I would say, enriched, or what would I say? the British became more angry with Tipu. He had to go through some economic losses, and in the third Anglo-Mysore War, when Tipu was defeated, Tipu had to hand over 2 of his sons to the British. And the main thing that I want to argue in this paper is that there is an element of sacrifice in the struggle of Tipu, because if you see the time frame of Tipu was defeated and killed in 1799. So in that particular time, India was divided into different states. Obviously there was no such things as nationalism, or I can say Indian nationalism. There was no such things there. But if I raise the question that what motivated Tipu to fight the British imperialism, and he was kind of very conscious about the British design that was going on. He knew that after defeating me, they might go to the Nizam and to the Marathas, and they might take control of the entire India. He was clearly conscious of the British design that Tipu used to in his play. So what motivated Tipu to act in a certain way or to challenge the British imperialism, even though there was no such things as Indian nationalism or nationalism in general in that particular point in time. So I believe here that Islam, or the philosophy of Islam, has a big role to play here, because Islam talks about fighting for the injustice, fighting for a kind of political autonomy, for an independent state, to remain autonomous, to remain independent. As the Islamic philosophy claims, he acted in a certain way and challenged the conscious British design. So sacrifice, people's sacrifice, or ultimately I would say the attitude to sacrifice opens up possibilities for resistance and political resistance. So this is what I want to claim in this particular paper. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the title of my today's presentation is Systematic Marginalization of Muslim Community in India, a Historical and Contemporary Analysis. But before I begin, I would like to thank the organizer for giving this opportunity to present here. Also, I would say that it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to listen all the insightful and thought-provoking lectures. Now, due to time limitation, it's not possible to delve deep into the historical and contemporary analysis. So I have decided to discuss my lecture in 2 parts. In the first section, I would like to focus on the contemporary issues that Muslim community is facing today. And in the second part, I would like to focus on the historical analysis and try to understand that the incidents that are happening today is not any isolated things, but it has its historical roots. So let's begin. So these are some contemporary issues. So you all know that since the rise of right-wing government in politics, particularly after the second term in 2019, the systematic erosion of Muslim rights, identity and access to opportunities has become a troubling norm. The constitutional guarantees meant to protect minorities are increasingly being altered, violated, or replaced with policies that undermine the socio-economic standing of the Muslim community. So some of the issues that have raised heated arguments and protests all around India with the Muslim community are: a prime example is the Citizen Amendment Act of 2019, which grants fast-track citizenship to non-Muslim refugees from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan, but which explicitly exclude Muslim community from getting any such benefits. Coupled with proposed NRC, National Register of Citizenship, this raised fear among Muslims of potential statelessness, creating widespread protest and accusation of targeting the Muslim community. Another issue that has generated significant controversy is the criminalization of instant triple talaq. While this move is portrayed as progressive step aimed at protecting women, but underneath its progressive fold, it disproportionately targets Muslim men, stigmatizes the entire community, and does little to address the real issue within Muslim community. Instead of fostering genuine reforms, it becomes a tool of social control. The hijab controversy in Karnataka further exemplifies the cultural attack on the Muslim community. The decision to ban hijab in school under the pretext of uniformity is a direct assault on the freedom of expression and religious practice. Furthermore, the revocation of Article 370, which stripped Jammu Kashmir of its special status, is another alarming development. This decision directly undermines the autonomy of the only Muslim majority states in India, eroding their autonomy and representation. The removal of special status aligns with government's broader objective of consolidating a majoritarian nation state. We have also seen the systematic targeting of Waqf properties, restriction on mosque construction, and the controversial finding of Hindu temple under masjid. While Hindu religious trusts are accorded considerable autonomy, the stringent oversight imposed on Waqf properties can be perceived as discriminatory. This selective targeting can be seen as a part of broader strategy to marginalize Muslims economically and socially. The distortion of history is another significant concern. Changes to school textbook, the erasure of the Mughal era, and renaming of places historically linked to Muslim culture are attempts to rewrite India's past and marginalize the contribution of Muslims. In addition, Muslims continue to be scapegoated in political discourse, with rhetoric often depicting them as terrorists, infiltrators, anti-nationals, attacking them for cow slaughtering or eating, interreligious marriage in the name of love jihad, and their stereotypical portrayal in media and cinema as terrorists, as criminal, or the historical rulers as tyrant, as oppressor, especially against Hindu subjects, destroying their masjid, converting them into Muslim forcefully, and the recent addition of the annulment of OBC reservation in West Bengal collectively represent a calculated marginalization of the Muslim community in establishing the majoritarian rule. We also know that the judge said that our nation will rule in accordance with the will of the majority. So coming to the next slide, that is the historical analysis. So in the second part, I would like to focus on historical marginalization, how Muslims who were once a ruler and an integral part of Indian politics and culture had started their backward marching, their slow awakening, role of Congress government in shaping their fate, and how the necessity of reservation felt and articulated in India, and the trajectory of it in West Bengal. So the transition of political power in India from Muslim rulers to the British significantly disrupted the socio-economic cohesion of Muslim community, which can be marked as the beginning of their socio-economic decline. As Muslims lost political power, they naturally struggled to embrace British education and culture. Meanwhile, upper caste Hindu capitalized on English education, tried to dominate governmental and bureaucratic structures. Over time, when upper caste Hindu began to demand political autonomy from British, Muslim community became increasingly aware of their marginalization. So, although late, they started realizing their underrepresentation, and thus a group of intellectual Muslim community arose. The establishment of Aligarh Muslim University, the formation of the Muslim League in 1906, and the Lucknow Pact of 1916 are some of the critical milestones in this process. As the independence movement gained momentum, this struggle for minority rights became more pronounced. Ambedkar vehemently opposed caste hierarchy within Hinduism, arguing that oppressed caste needed to actively assert their rights, as Brahminical elite would never voluntarily grant them. Accordingly, he demanded separate electorates for Dalits. At the same time, under Muhammad Ali Jinnah's leadership, Muslim community realized the same. In response, Jinnah's 14 points included proposals such as separate electorates, reservation for Muslims in education and employment, freedom of religious expression, etc. This demand faced resistance from Gandhi and other Congress leaders, who feared that accommodating them would undermine their vision of centralized power. Such opposition met with granting Ambedkar reservation for Dalit instead of separate electorates, and Jinnah a separate state. Dr. Ambedkar himself was critical of Gandhi's stance and saw the Pune Pact as a setback for Dalit political independence. Then, while granting Muslims a separate state under upper caste Hindu leaders ensured that similar demands for rights or reservation within India were denied to those who remained here. So these two historical incidents together, Pune Pact and the partition, so these two incidents together indicate that how these two incidents together underscore how the marginalization of both Muslim or depressed class was not incidental but intrinsic to the power structure established at the birth of the nation, and that has got intensified in present political climate, with the Muslim community bearing a particularly heavy burden. Moreover, with partition, we all know the educated or affluent Muslim went to Pakistan, leaving poor-class minority Muslims in further abysmal. Unlike Ambedkar, who secured the reservation for SCs and STs after independence through constitutional provision, there were hardly anyone for securing the same for Muslims. After independence, a commission was made to identify socially and educationally backward classes in 1953, Kaka-Kalekar Commission, and for recommending measures to improve their socio-economic condition, which first divided the term backward class and argued that backward class should not only include SC/ST but other communities are facing similar disadvantages. The commission listed 2,399 communities as socially and educationally backward, including many caste and non-caste groups from various religious communities. It suggested 25% reservation in educational and government jobs for backward class. Despite its detailed findings, the central government rejected the report in 1956. Then after a long 30 years, Mandal Commission was constituted by then Prime Minister Morarji Desai under the chairmanship of Bindu Prasad Mandal. It was found to identify socially and educationally backward classes and suggest measures for their advancement. The commission concluded that 52% of India's population belong to this other backward class. This commission highlights the severe underrepresentation of this group in government jobs and higher education. Their socio-economic condition is sometimes worse than SCs or STs. The committee recommended 27% reservation for OBC in central and state jobs and educational institutions. The commission report was submitted in 1980, but again its recommendations were not implemented due to political challenges. In 1990, the then Prime Minister VP Singh announced the implementation of 27% reservations for OBC in central government jobs. After the central government's decision in 1990 to implement the Mandal Commission recommendation, several states aligned their policies with the central mandate, like Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. But the West Bengal government was very slow to respond to this Mandal Commission's recommendation. Then Prime Minister Jyoti Basu was in opinion that there is no such community, backward community in West Bengal. And he was in opinion that such reservation could further, it is divisive in nature. So it's better not to implement.
Please try to conclude this.
Okay. So however, after much discussion, it was only allowed 5% reservation, which was later increased 7%. But once the Satar Committee report came out and it pointed out the extreme backwardness of Muslim community, then the then government tried to implement 17% reservation in 2010 at the end of their political period. Once the power transition happens, then TMC government also implemented 17% reservation, including many communities from Muslim community, many backward class from Muslim community. So this inclusion was an affirmative action aimed at promoting upward mobility for the Muslim who has historically been denied of their rights. But this inclusion has sparked heated arguments among opposition party in West Bengal, particularly from right-wing group. So as I already mentioned at the beginning that in 2019, once the right-wing government came into power for the second time, slowly things became even more critical for the Muslim community. Their nasty game of playing in the name of religion becomes so widespread that it has even corrupted the jury system. The Calcutta High Court took all the case seriously and annulled all the certificate issued after 2010. While the court's reasoning focused on procedural flaws, it can be argued that verdict aligns with the broader trends of exclusionary governance. It is emblematic of a broader project to diminish the socio-political agency of the Muslim community in India, in general, and West Bengal in particular. So the current status is the West Bengal government challenged the judgment at the Supreme Court of India. Various OBC and Muslim organizations also appealed in the court, and however, the last hearing, that was on 9 December, their Supreme Court also echoes the judgment of High Court, where extreme backwardness of Muslim community is not under consideration, but a narrative is created that no reservation can be given on the basis of religion. They are not willing to see it that they are the most backward cut, so they should be given. Again, they are playing in the name of religion. So playing in the name of religion and targeting a particular community, even by court, is something a matter of great concern. So so what's to be done? Is there any way out? So to understand the broader conspiracy of the government, we have to understand the broader conspiracy of the government. First act is to make ourselves aware of what's happening, why these are happening. Is this just some isolated instances or part of some broader conspiracy? After awareness, it's time to fight back. But fight back as a Muslim. As Aisha Jalal in her article says, when your rights are being violated as Muslim, so you should ask for it as Muslim. But sadly enough, we have lost our identity as a true Muslim. So, which Iqbal also said that মুখে বলে তুমি মির্জা সৈয়দ মাহবুব তেজস্বী বীর পাঠান সবকিছু হওয়া সম্ভব নয় শুধু তুমি মুসলমান. So we have to yesterday all the speakers also highlighted that we will not only be a born Muslim or speaking Muslim, we have to be a practicing Muslim, and we have to imbibe the Quranic spirit within us, so that when we will imbibe the Quranic spirit, in order to be a true Muslim and to bring revolutionary change in society, it is mandatory to become a true practicing Muslim who will imbibe the spirit of Quran. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We will very quickly take a few questions if there are any. We have the first speaker, Dr. Tasnima Yasmin, in which paper she had rightly pointed out how the voices from Bengal had been politically and consciously kept aside from the nation building process. Then we have Sheikh Abid Hasan, who points out how the present scenario seems to be very difficult for the Muslims, and he compares this to the world scenario at large. Then we had Arif Ansari, who spoke about the legacy of Tipu Sultan, a very famous waiter by the right wing, through his work Girish Karnad's vision. And last we had Masuma Khatun, how she presents a very systematic analysis of how Muslim community in particular had been marginalized, and she comes up with a roadmap how and what can be done in order to support a change. Questions, if any, very quickly? Yes.
Thank you so much to all the speakers. I have a question for Dr. Yasmin. You have mentioned in the book for India and Islam, so you mentioned a point of pseudo-elitism. So could you please elaborate a bit more what he actually said about this pseudo-elitism?
There are two facets of that. One is when he talks about the educated Muslims and their responsibility towards the community. So the community service that needs to be done. So then there is again a polarization in that as well, because you have some elitist, so-called elitist Muslims who claim to be the saviors of the community in terms of social service. So that is one side. And the other is in the political arena, because Rezaul Karim was, later on in his life, he was attached with the Indian National Congress and the entire, as a politician. So he began as a social activist, and then he started working for the Congress, and then later he became a Congress politician. Further on, he became the Freedom Fighter of India. He was awarded for that as well. So he talks about pseudo-elitism in the Congress party as well. So from the political arena also, he has mentioned a lot about the so-called elitist movements and the elitist family movements, which we are seeing right now in the present day Congress party also. So both the aspects are described in the book for India and Islam.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And I have a question for Arif.
Yes.
Please, Arif, you have mentioned about sacrifice, and also you have mentioned in Girish Karnad's Dreams of Tipu Sultan that somehow he was motivated by this, I can say that he was a believer of Islam, and that's why he also motivated to fight against the imperialists. You have also mentioned that. So I get confused because maybe I missed the part that the sacrificial part, it is also coming with a core believer of Islam. That is, you also mentioned. So how could you mix these two things, or how could you justify these two things? That in the play, because I haven't read the play. Okay, so if you could elaborate this a bit, the sacrificial part.
Yeah, I have a question to add on this. When you say sacrifice, do you mean the loss of human lives in war? Are you talking about that? Or what kind of sacrifice are you exactly talking about? And that one, and then rightly, like Shamita said, how do you justify that? What did Tipu Sultan believe in exactly as a Muslim practitioner? And what were his views regarding sacrifice explicitly? Okay. So if you could please elaborate on that.
For answering your question, I would have to say that what is sacrifice in the Islamic tradition? I'm simply saying not that there could be an elaborate discussion on sacrifice in the Islamic tradition. To simply put, in Islam, sacrifice is a kind of action in devotion, action for the devotion. Right. So here, the kind of sacrifice I'm referring, I would say it is a kind of secular kind of sacrifice. Okay, not about killing animal for the devotion of God and all that. So it is a kind of secular understanding of sacrifice. Here I'm putting in that particular sense, and I'm putting that into a religious narrative because in Islam, it is permissible to fight for oppression and injustice, and to have a kind of autonomous status, which is why I'm putting the act of Tipu, that I claim that economic sacrifice and handing over his son to the British and all that in a kind of sacrificial lens. Yeah.
Right?
Right?
I have a question. One second.
Thank you. I have a question and one comment. My question is to the speaker who presented on Rezaul Karim. Thank you for your research. This is very, very important. If I am not mistaken, you said that Rezaul Karim was opposed to class politics. Why? What was his objection to that? This is the question. And my comment is this, that while I am open to celebrate plurality of opinion coming from the researchers, I think in the name of research we should also stop from calling names, comparing Bengal with Israel. This is not only to belittle the experience of the Palestinians. I think it flies in the face of facts. And what makes the researcher think that Bengali Muslims are a monolithic community? There has been, varied differences, and varied parameters of experience as well, and experience of exploitation. Let us fight for justice. Let us write a talk against injustice, but not, resort to name calling. This is my comment. Thank you.
I have also the same question.
Can I respond?
Just a minute. My question is also, that gentleman, I don't know, just I entered that time. He just uttered the word Hindu about Bengal, Hindu Israel. I think this is the exaggeration of these things. But our today's topic is what is the social and cultural or academic problems of the Muslims of Bengal. But how does come this comparison that some forces are trying to create a Hindu Israel in West Bengal? I could not understand that thing. That is my question. You can please explain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Murshidda. So I am not belittling the visible violence being practiced against the Palestinians, first of all. And I am comparing a model that is already established in political science as ethnic democracy or ethnocracy.
Ethnocracy is something else.
Now let me speak.
Okay.
Yeah. So I gave you a model how the communist as well as the progressive Ambedkarite as well as the right wing and the quote unquote Hindu Bengali nationalists all want to carve out a piece of land.
From where?
From undivided India to create West Bengal, to create Assam. I gave all the political history also. How political fixing happens in Sylhet referendum, how the electoral is communalized, and deliberately Muslim League is given importance. That is the problem of your ignorance. That is the problem of your ignorance.
Not right. 1 second, Abid.
That is the wrong
I get
explanation
your point.
of the Indian that is freedom after
Now, if we look
independence.
at if we look at
Absolutely, 1
the
second.
sanctity of
Abid,
Israel.
1 second. I'm controlling this.
Yeah.
So we will take this probably in the lunchtime because this is a never-ending debate.
Yeah.
And it is good to have differences because we should agree to disagree. But this is not the problem right now.
Yeah.
Because there is another session and we are already deep into the other session. Okay. One last question if there is any, and then we call it a day.